Hello and welcome to this video. I have BYRNE Power back again. You know, a few months ago he did an excellent chat with me about minstrelsy and blackface, which seemed to upset certain people. Hopefully we won't be upsetting anybody tonight
We
because
might.
we talk, well, yeah, there's going to be some people who think they're proper music fans that might get upset. And obviously, my thumbnail is going to draw them in by thinking that we are going to be critical, but I don't think we are going to be that critical, are we, Bern?
Uh, I would say, critically minded, but also open.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it is, I have my criticisms, but I also have my appreciation for sure. So,
So I tell you why I gave you a shout to do this one. You've put out two excellent documentaries on YouTube. They're very epic, long, detailed. They go into esoteric areas. Uh, you put out two on Taylor Swift. And when they came out, I watched the first one, and then especially after I watched the second one, I that I started to get drawn in. You were discussing how you got drawn in, and up until now, I've just ignored Taylor Swift. I've got no interest in her. I'm a musician, I've got nothing against her, but she's a pop star. Little kids like her. That's what I thought.
right.
And then I started to watch your second documentary, and there was a scene where she crashed some party of somebody who couldn't get to her gig.
Right,
And
right.
there was a whole bunch of people there, but I think it was this little girl couldn't go, and she arrived and she pulled out a guitar, and the first thing was she could perform magnetically in someone's living room, and the magic was still there. And I thought that's a serious performer.
Hmm.
Her songs are catchy and they're well written. I got no problem with that, but there seemed to be something quite moving about it, and I think I had a tear in my eye watching it, and I
Yeah,
thought
like
this
I
is
said, that one got to me too. It was just like,
it, entirely positive. I thought this is an entirely positive thing, and I'm getting a reaction to it. She has single-handedly rescued the music business, hasn't she? Because I think if she wasn't
oh,
around now, we would be looking desperately at this. But she has made a lot of money. She's made loads of money on tour. She has is selling CDs, and she is actually, basically boosted up the vinyl
yeah.
music industry. And I think a few months ago, with the bands I was in, you just could not press vinyl because everyone was pressing Taylor Swift vinyl. So
Hmm.
this is a phenomenon, isn't it? So the first question I've got to you is, how did you arrive? I mean, because you're not the target audience for Taylor, so how did you arrive?
Yeah, evidently
It's like,
not. And I'll be
you know,
69 in a couple of weeks. So, no, probably not the standard audience. But in a way, we talked about minstrel music last time. This is the other end of the scale. And I've been trying to keep my eye on, as Humphrey Bogart once said, I got to keep my eye on all the ends of this dizzy affair, just trying
mm,
to understand where music has come from and where it's going. And in many ways, I consider Taylor not to be a rejuvenating factor, is almost like maybe the end of a line. Like, will there still be people who sell out concert stadiums the way she does, 10, 15 years from now? Can she do it? Well, she can, but she's doing 3.5 hour shows. And she's going around the world and she does this night after night. I mean, she takes breaks, but it's just astounding. And when how 3.5 hours of playing music,
mm.
straight pretty much, is with the kind of show she does, the lights and the sounds equipment and everything. It's just a phenomenal thing. She has, I think, I heard today about 320 or so employees who just do a lot of this
Mm.
stuff. So, and she pays them really well. I mean, if you hear like the truck drivers were getting $100,000 bonuses, which is, I feel
Mm.
for the truck drivers. I've driven stuff around. So what got me into it was, of course, I noticed Taylor Swift years ago. I noticed when the other, the thing with Kanye West showing up. I didn't go into all of that because I think it's it's people beat that stuff to death and her relationships and such. But what I noticed was I noticed her changing from this country pop star into a pop star, and then from a pop star into a pop star who was reacting to some of the things going on in her life, and then mutating beyond that. And so I noticed that back in the day. You know, I've just kind of kept an eye on her. I've looked into other of these 21st century divas, and actually spent more time, you know, thinking about Billie Eilish or Kesha or somebody, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, than I have with Taylor. Although I did watch the Miss America documentary back in 2020, and you know, so I've kept my eye, you know, my ear to the ground. But this year, it was the film. I didn't even realize she was going out on tour, but it was the film of the tour I noticed was coming. And I could hear the rumblings back in the middle of last summer, just saying, this film is doing something remarkable. And what this film is doing, and I didn't even get into all of this because there's just so much Taylor uh, Taylor stuff to do that you just can't get into it all. But the film literally showed up at the moment when, during the Hollywood writers' strike, she wanted to get someone like Disney to release it. They were like, and they gave her what she considered to be a low offer. And she said, no, we'll just put it out ourselves. And that's what she did. She puts out this movie, 3.5 hours, 3 hours plus, about 320. She puts it out. It takes over the movie theaters. It ran here in Georgia, Tbilisi, Georgia, in the Caucasus, not America, in the Caucasus, almost sold out for over a month. You know, and I mean, part of it was helped by the fact there weren't any other movies. But interestingly enough, Beyonce also did a tour last year and put out a movie of it. You don't hear about that. You know, it came and went. You know, I'm sure it made a few dollars. But what she did was she got in touch with, I think, AMC, the big movie distribution chain in America, and said, I want to make a deal directly with you. And this freaked Hollywood out. And because what she did in one stroke was she circumvented the entire Hollywood system, all of it, and made an end run for the goalpost. She gets there, and I mean, she made something like $200 million. No, it was more than that. Anyway, she made a ton of money on it, maybe 600 million or something. It was substantial. And that, I started hearing rumblings of her putting this in the theaters before it happened, because I pay attention to movies too. And so I said, okay, evidently I'd better get back into Taylor here and see what's happening. And I started looking more and more, and I came across the New York University. Her receiving an honorary doctorate from them, and I watched her talk, and I said, "Oh, this woman makes any political figure in America look stupid," because generally they are. You know, I mean, and clearly, and I said, if she ever decided to run for president, not right now, but, you know, 10, 20 years down the line, she'd have it in a moment, because everyone knows, you know, people often say she's a genius. What she's really a genius at is marketing and business. More than just the music. She just has this way, both of her parents being financial advisors. And so, you know, at a very young age, she figured something out. And so once, you know, that's why she got so mad when Scott Borchetta and Scooter Braun from, what was it, Big Machine, the company that they had formed. Well, Scott Borchetta sold all of her masters to this, what do they call those groups of people that, investment group that is not another music company, but just an investment group. And she was so mad because she had the money. to buy them. And they wouldn't. They just sold them out from under her. And so, but I looked at that and I saw that and I said, okay, Taylor has obviously become someone I need to reckon with. And I knew enough of her songs, so I said, okay, let's get into the music now. You know, she's obviously flexing her very powerful muscles. And I was just thinking, who's more famous as a woman right now on Earth? And I was trying to think of someone, and I can't think of anyone. She's not as famous as Princess Di was at the height of her fame, because everyone on Earth knew who she was, basically, because of the crown and such. But and there are plenty of people who don't know who Taylor Swift is. That is, say, if you don't pay attention to the internet, if you're not watching certain kinds of media, you're not going to know. You know, but she's just kind of climbed into the strata. She ended up making over $1 billion. She's now worth well over $1 billion. She keeps touring. She's going on until December, not steady on, but with enough shows to, you know, each show. I mean, she brings the economy to town. You know, she did 3 shows, I think, in Wembley, in London. She's coming back for, I think, 4 or 5 more. And
I mean, the thing that's interesting is that at a period of time where everyone's saying the music industry is dying and it's moving on to other things, and everyone feels like that, Taylor Swift has actually come out and become one of the biggest music stars in history that rivals any of the greats as far as you want to go, and may end up being even bigger than anybody, bigger than Michael Jackson, bigger than anybody.
The only person she's not bigger than culturally is the Beatles. And I don't know if you saw Rick Beato's, he did a short thing on comparing, someone was saying Taylor Swift was bigger than the Beatles. And he was doing things like comparing the amount of money they made in, you know, bringing the money up to date. But more importantly, you know, the cultural effect of the Beatles changed the world. Taylor Swift is not going to have that kind of.
But there is a cultural effect. I mean, there's a few artists out there, because I always say on my channel, when you're evaluating artists, the one thing that's almost like at the top of the list is where you change culture, where that band changes, say, fashion, or beyond that, you know, the things that people want to do or the places they want to go, you know. I mean, but the Beatles are there. People wanted to take drugs. They wanted to study Eastern philosophy, didn't they? All these things were coming from the Beatles, and I feel that there seems to be a momentum with Taylor Swift that is still growing, getting ever bigger.
And she's not done changing her ideas yet. You know, that is to say, she hasn't come into her final form, so to speak. So we don't know exactly where she's going, but she has emerged, I think. I mean, there are women behind the scenes who have more money, you know, but we don't know much about them. Rihanna has more money than her, but that's mostly from investments she's made into certain companies and such. So it isn't, you know, everything that Taylor has done, it comes directly from her music, which is pretty amazing. And so I just started getting into her music. And what I realized along the way is, why is Taylor Swift such a magnetic person? The music, I mean, I can find people whose music I like much more, you know. At the same time, there are, say, I don't know, 20, 30 songs of hers I think are really great, you know. And her ability to communicate them, interestingly enough, apart from a period in 2019 on her Lover album, when she was starting, at that point, she's starting to make a bit of propaganda videos. You know, she has ones called You Better Calm Down. It's definitely like, you know, we ought to, you know, stop getting upset about LGBT issues. But she's in a small box. She doesn't see the bigger picture. But the point is, during that period, I thought she's getting a little lost trying to just convince people of things that are political and such. And she shouldn't do that. You know, it's just, and that's why I was glad that her Lover tour got canceled by the COVID. And so it sent her back into herself. And then the next three albums, I think, are the two quieter ones, Folklore and Evermore, and then Midnights are just, I think, basically among her best. And then there's a
Yeah.
newer one, you know.
So you obviously I don't know her stuff that much. I come from a point where I've got no interest in her. If I was to
Mhm.
listen to the music she makes, my commercial professional musician, I could go, well, that's quite a good song, and that's a good hook. But for me personally, there's no interest in there. When I
Exactly.
watched your documentaries, I then
It's a
got pulled
story.
in, and I started to enjoy the music because the music was the backdrop to what was going on, and
Yeah.
her, and I suddenly realised, oh my God, it's her, and
Yes.
her nature is different to anything that's happened before, I think.
Yeah,
Although it,
what I was just trying to say with talking before I got to talking about the Lover albums is she has basically, certainly at this point, no really postmodern aspect to her. She's very sincere. I mean, she can laugh at
mm,
herself.
mm,
She's got a definite sense of humor. If you watch some of her Saturday Night Live sketches that she
mm,
did much earlier in her career, she's genuinely funny. And what's interesting is she'll often take, I mean, she does one character doing PSAs as a young girl,
mm.
public service announcements, and she's got the worst braces in the world on her teeth. And she just looks so bad. She's not afraid but in a sense, you look and go, oh, that is how she sees herself. In a sense, she always sees herself as this dorky. I think she's been trying to get away from being 15 years old for a long time. And that's what makes the whole story at the moment. In a sense, who Taylor Swift is, she's a story. And once you catch the wave of the story, you start saying, oh, what's going to happen with this guy, Travis, the football player? And it becomes something because suddenly you realize, oh, this is how I see it. If she gets married to him, which she's wanted to do for a long time, but she's been hanging out with these boy men, and whereas Travis comes across much more as just a guy, and uh, that in a sense she will have fulfilled her earlier dreams. If you go back to her videos, where she's the dork looking at the like the high school jocks and stuff, and saying, you know, kind of her heart beating, but she can't join them because she's not cool. And so, in a sense, it's like, okay, well, maybe she'll get to graduate high school soon. And that's part of the whole story. You know, and you follow this story, the ups and downs.
Mm.
I mean, the Swifties just go absolutely crazy. Plus, she's always done this thing from the very first album of putting little clues and such. She calls them all Easter eggs, you know, little clues in all sorts of things that you start saying, why is that there? And why is that there? And indeed, there is some reason. And so, because she puts all of this stuff into her videos and music, it causes people to go nuts looking for them. And unfortunately, it has worked so well that now it's very difficult for her to have a public life.
I want to focus on your two documentaries and what I found compelling in the documentaries and how good they were, and why I gave you a message. So I really want to direct some of my lot over to them because they're
Yeah.
fantastic. One of the brilliant things about them is that when you went to see the film, if I'm right, it looks like you're filming the film sat in the cinema. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
And there are
And
girls
so,
dancing around.
yeah, and so the kids have got up and they've gone to the front of the stage, and at certain points they're actually almost like turning around and they're performing, aren't they? To everyone else who was sat there.
At the very end, Taylor and all her people are like bowing like this. So are all the kids in the auditorium. They're turning towards,
Yeah.
those of us still in our seats and bowing towards us as if they've been in the film.
And because of the vantage point that you've shot it from, it's the same vantage point if you saw her live, and so the perspective was making her legs look very long and
Yeah.
powerful, and then she was like looked like a giant. And I assumed this must be even more exaggerated at the gig because you've got this tiny little Taylor Swift which is in the middle. she's not on stage. She feels like she's in the middle of everything, but she's
Yeah.
tiny. But there's also walking around is this huge sort of goddess Taylor Swift at the same time,
Right.
and that I've always said this in art. I think the sublime comes from bringing together the subject and the object to be at
Mhm.
once the god of everything, sort of the Nietzschean god of everything, and the tiny speck in the world.
Right.
And when I watched it, I felt if you're a teenager getting to the point where you start to realize this, that you're at once nothing and you are everything, which I think is a fundamental thing, which then drives all sorts of deeply philosophical and cultural things that out there. And I felt that I was watching that. I felt like she was all powerful and vulnerable. She was very beautiful, but just normal and
Exactly.
geeky. Everything's she was walking around dressed almost like a Roman goddess, but she also looked like a cheerleader, as you pointed out. She's dressed like,
Yeah.
and the other thing that I found interesting is what I thought was there's a genius here, but it's not the same genius that I grew to appreciate watching Led Zeppelin and then the Mavish and Miles Davis. And the thing I appreciate by Miles Davis is that he was in control. He was the author of this. And I feel Taylor Swift, unlike many other pop stars that are around now, she seems to have she's imprinted herself on everything she's doing. But it's like a scrapbook that you would find in a girl's bedroom. You open it up, and the idea of her being this goddess and within that being the esoteric, that she
Mhm.
hides these things, and she's on your documentary, she's going through what these things symbolize. And I
Right.
thought, she's made up her own symbols. This is, she's
Exactly.
going, oh, the snake represents this. I think, well, it doesn't normally. The snake, would represent wisdom, but it can represent the devil. It can, it represents, eternal time, infinity. That's what the snake, and she was saying it represented something else.
Well,
And I thought that was fascinating that she was creating her own world
well,
because the great artists do.
the snake is very interesting because there's this whole thing with Kanye West where Kanye wrote this song where he says, I think I could have sex with Taylor Swift, basically. But he calls her a bitch and all this stuff. He had called her up ahead of time and said, hey, I've got this song that I mentioned you in. Is that okay? And she goes, yeah, that's okay. But then she didn't know what the song really was.
Mm,
And then what happened was an edited version of their conversation came out, which made it sound like Taylor knew everything about the bitch stuff and the sex stuff. So at this point, and this was after her 1989 album, which is really the pop breakout album,
mm,
so many fans turned on her and called her essentially a snake. And so all of her social media accounts started getting these snake emoji sent at her. And so what she did was, I mentioned the situationist détournement
mm,
of taking
mm,
the image and then turning it back around on the person putting the image out. And that was her use of the snake, so, which I thought was really interesting. Now, of course, I'm a Christian, but the stupider among my Christian brethren immediately latched on and said, she's made plotted with the Illuminati.
mm,
And they saw the devil stuff because every time you see a snake, it's the devil. To which the answer is,
mm.
not even in the Bible is that true. There's the whole thing with
Yeah.
Moses holding up the snakes and God healing
Mm,
people from that. So,
mm,
although later that becomes an idol, it gets really complex. But she is a master or mistress, or of turning things around and making her own symbols. So even just colors. She has a song called Red. And in the song Red, you listen to it, and when the song first came out, the more sophisticated critics at like Rolling Stone, they were saying, well, this is just a stupid song about colors and how you feel. From this point of view, from 2024, almost every album comes with a color scheme. You know, that's how much she thinks about these things. So when you listen to the song Red, you start realizing, oh man, this girl's thinking symbolically almost all the time. And she puts it into her work. And like I said, the dangers are she's so inventive and creative. And at the same time, like I said in the documentaries, I don't know any other figure in music who has so created this world in which everything goes into her. You know, the Beatles hated all those screaming girls. They didn't hate the girls, but they hated all
The
the
attention.
Beatlemania.
Yeah.
And that was one of the major reasons why they stopped touring, because they felt they
Mm.
couldn't be heard anymore. Whereas when you watch her, I'm really I think it's out there on streaming somewhere right now. But when I really want to get the Blu-ray, and I want them to put it out.
Mm.
When you watch the documentary, I mean, this live concert, you realize, oh man, has there ever been anyone who can control a crowd of 100,000 people like she can? You know, I think maybe the answer is yes. And if you have to go back into history, into another era
Mm.
to find that person, and it's a kind of a dangerous thing to have that kind of power. And that's one of the reasons I also said I got to pay attention to this person. She has maybe, I don't know, at least 200 million followers, you know, minimum. You know,
It is fascinating. It I think early you said that there's nothing postmodern about her, and I feel that that aspect of her has actually increased.
what do you
And of
mean?
course, in that, I think there's a certain irony that exists with rock and roll.
Hmm.
You know, rock and roll, you know, emerges at the same time as postmodernism, and there's a
Right.
direct link, you know,
Hmm.
across. And I think that sort of postmodern ideas are sort of floundering now,
Right.
and people are much more interested in, rather than someone being cool because they're ironic, they're cool because they're authentic. They really are that, you
Right.
know, so in the rock and roll era, you would walk up on stage, and then you would be like Miles Davis, sniffy with the audience and aloof. You would be above them and not
Hmm.
bothered. You would show that
Hmm.
you're not bothered by the attention. But with Taylor Swift, you could see that she is just imploring the audience to love her, and if they love her, she will love them back, and it's genuine.
Right.
So,
Well,
so she walks out to the middle of these theaters, sort of
yeah,
bathed in the love of all these people, and
exactly.
it's entirely positive. And she does seem to continually want to sort of jump out on unsuspecting people. You know that the
Hmm.
goddess sort of arrives and she comes in and she hugs them and they go hysterical. That all that I thought was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I've seen this before. Um, Many years ago, a friend of mine decided they wanted to take me to a big Bollywood concert, and the headliner was Shah Rukh Khan, which at that point in time was the biggest star in the world. And the show started. There was obviously no band. There was this sort of dancers came out. They danced, and then at a certain point, Shah Rukh Khan just walked out, and he walked out into the middle of the audience, and he stood there, and everyone was just worshipping, and you could see his big face on the camera, and he looked down to the camera, looked into the camera, and winked, and it was that flip of, I'm just a regular bloke, here we all are, and he winked at everybody who went
Hmm.
hysterical, and I felt it. And part of it was the fact that this guy, amongst, you know, Bollywood, that's is a huge thing. Shah Rukh Khan was the biggest thing there was, which made him one of the biggest artists in the world, and you felt the fame.
Right.
You were, you know, I think maybe the other character that's like that is Donald Trump. You know,
Yeah, in a
it's
different kind of way, but
a
yeah.
different, yeah, that where you've got that level of fame.
Yeah,
But but
he's like the asshole that everybody likes for because he just shoots his mouth off and says whatever, you know. And there's a certain kind of person who goes like, "You're speaking for us, man."
yeah, but again, with Donald Trump, it's he is not postmodern. There's no irony there, and I think
No.
when there was that point, I think the thing that made Trump was that point when he was debating Hillary Clinton, and she said, "You don't pay any tax," and he goes, "I know because I'm clever."
Yeah, he doesn't dodge it at all.
Yeah. It's like, and I think everyone went, "Oh, well, I don't agree with that," but he seems to be actually telling the truth.
Right, right.
Everyone says he lies, and he does lie, but by the same token, everyone loves him because he says the truth, but it's a different kind of truth.
Right.
It's not an ironic postmodern.
Well,
All the
it's
politicians
like
can't be.
he sweeps the dirt under the carpet, holds the carpet up for you to see it, and shows you him sweeping it, and then puts it down.
That's the best analogy. Yeah, that is fantastic. But with Taylor Swift, when I was watching your documentaries, she's her face is it's so American. She hasn't got a cool face, if you know what I mean.
No,
I mean,
got
she's a
kind of
pretty
squinty
girl.
eyes, and
Yeah,
you know,
and it's quite pinched, but it goes. So when you look at the face, sometimes it seems to morph to becoming like elfin
yeah.
and
Well, if you
otherworldly.
remember in the second documentary, Taylor Swift, goddess, witch, or Christian, at the very end of that, I show her, and this is from the Miss Americana documentary, just kind of having a breakdown about all, it's just like it's gotten so big, it's no longer about music, and she's in tears. But when you look at that face, you just go like, it's just that could be the girl next door, literally. And then if you think about her on the stage, you're going like, and she is well aware of the giant small Taylor problem issue. So for instance, if you watch, and it's one of my favorite videos of her, it's called Antihero. And in it, I played a part of a clip from it in there, but you see her as a bigger version of herself. Later in the film, at the very end, a huge, gigantic version of herself comes over. And during the concert, it shows there's Taylor, the little Taylor, there's Taylor, the singer, on the screen behind her, and then Taylor, the giant, walking through a city as like a kaiju, like Godzilla, although not as mean,
Yeah.
And she's well aware that she has become this thing that is, there's an abstraction. There's an abstraction to the way people criticize her. There's an abstraction to the way her fans, praise her and go crazy. She's become such a symbolic creature for everyone that.
And the other thing is that if I was picking Michael Jackson or Prince or Elvis Presley or anybody from the rock and roll era,
Right.
they're iconic. When I went and picked this picture of Taylor Swift up in the background, I grabbed it and I was a bit rushed, and I thought, is that Taylor Swift or isn't it? And if someone turned around and said, Andy, that is not Taylor Swift, you've picked the wrong person, I would go, oh yeah,
Okay.
probably,
Yeah.
because
That's,
she's not iconic in that way. She's not iconic like
No.
Elvis Presley.
No. That's about 3 or 4 years into her career there, that picture. And it's interesting. I keep noticing the moments when she morphs. And I find it very fascinating. I mean, one of the people, there is a playbook for the way superstars mutate, because the great superstars never are just one person all the way through their careers. So the Beatles made that big, huge shift, into the psychedelic kind of era. But then they made shifts at the end that you could tell they were winding down. I just spent time with the Let It Bleed, Let It Be series, Let It Bleed. That would be the Rolling Stones. We're waiting for them to die off so we can find out what really went on there. But then, I mean, they say that this pattern goes back to Harry Houdini, who was at least 3 different things in his career. So he was a magician, then he was the great escape artist, which of course really built his fame to the end. But then the last section of his career, he was the guy who was going around busting fake, fraudulent spiritist mediums.
Yeah.
But you can see it in Frank Sinatra. He starts off as the young, like, big band singer. Then he kind of morphs into that guy at the bar with the fedora and a couple of bottles. But then he turns into, the guy with the gangsters, and then he ends up being, the old gray fox kind of guy.
No, yeah, like a Godfather almost.
Yeah, and then there's Dylan, and you can go through the different periods of Dylan. And there's quite a few of them. And the person who seems to have looked back at all of this and said, I see the pattern, now I'm going to play with it, is David Bowie. Bowie is incredible at coming up with, because he was doing his David Jones stuff earlier, and no one wanted to hear another Brit, blonde-haired Brit, so what? Changed his name to Bowie, still didn't do it. Becomes is Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, and then he becomes so alien that suddenly everyone pays attention. And then he was like, okay, and then he's the Thin White Duke, and then he's like in his Berlin electronic era, kind of down, depressed. Then he moves into the guy doing the Let's Dance stuff, and then several other periods after that, although he seems to have settled down and become more himself. And Taylor, well, Madonna is really important here because she goes through all these changes. But Taylor kind of goes through them in a more natural sense, in the sense that she is genuinely the pop country. And I want to emphasize it's pop country she's doing. She's not doing Willie Nelson. She's not doing Loretta Lynn. She's not doing Kitty Wells. She's not doing Johnny Cash, Hank Williams style stuff. She's doing this very much Dixie Chicks and Shania Twain, who are very marginal as far as authentic country goes. And then she moves into her genuine pop era. But even there, she moves into a darker variation on it with a lot more electronics going on. And then kind of moves into this weird pastel rainbow phase, which is where things get stopped. But then suddenly she's the organic earth girl during COVID. She has 2 albums where she's just wearing very natural wool fabrics and stuff. And then she comes out of that and she's more of this kind of like downbeat singer, which is the last couple of albums have been like that, so it's interesting. But I think in her case, rather than being as David Bowie is definitely the performer. He was trained in drama and such, taking the mask, he's the Harlequin, and now he's Pulcinella, and now he's using the different drama masks, whereas Taylor's not. Taylor is being pushed by forces both within and without, which causes her to have to change to the next thing.
Well, when I was developing young artists, which I've done for the last 30 years, there's a couple of things which you find are really rare with artists. And one of them is the ability to perform, to have a character, to have an alter ego, and to change the mask of that alter ego. Normal people don't do that. They form a band and they go down the pub and they stand there and they play, and it's them playing. And it's very rare that you see someone that has a character. And I noticed this early on. And that, for me, almost like personifies this era. Because as I'm talking to you, what I feel is going on here is Taylor Swift is not of now. She's come from it, but she is no longer of this period of popular music related to rock and roll, related to black music coming out of, rhythm and blues and all that type of stuff, and then the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all those tropes that we understand that goes with that. She is a development from it, but there's a subtle difference, or in some cases a major difference. And I think that's what I've suddenly went, oh, this is really interesting, because is this foretelling what's going to happen in the future? Because she's making billions. And someone told me the other day is that the amount of money she makes, if she was a company, she would come out in equal to some really huge companies or even countries in certain, it's a huge amount of money. And if there's money there, that will drive the industry, to pursue this and look for the next person that does this. Now, there's something here that it keeps chiming with me, and I don't know where it's coming from, but I keep comparing it to Harry Potter. You compared it to sort of the Disney era princesses, that there was a whole, you
Yeah.
know, and I know this because a lot of the students that I taught that 10 years ago were getting into Taylor Swift much earlier on were that era that had grown up watching all the different Disney princesses. And I can remember them actually in the college I was at asking if they could do Disney songs and dress up as princesses, which I don't think the generation before would have wanted to do, who were into
No,
Nirvana,
no,
and I
no.
don't think they'd want to do that now. But
Yeah, and
there's
I don't think you remember any girls when you were growing up who had this fixation on, all these cartoon Disney princess girls, even though there were a few already from the old days.
yeah,
Still, it didn't attract that kind of a thing.
and that pure princess image has been sullied by either sort of the identity politics going, well, we've got to have it like this, and this, which started with Frozen, and they're
Yeah.
decent
Well,
Disney princesses, but or it's
it's
been lampooned,
it's a
you know.
narcissistic image.
Mm,
Those girls are always uh, kind of it's kind of the origin of a lot of today's um, I don't know how to characterize it. Some people call it girl boss when you see it in Star Wars or something like
mm,
that, or Marvel. There are always girls who are totally perfect, and the
mm,
only really part of the drama is when they're going to be free to be completely themselves, who are already perfect,
mm,
which is basically Little Mermaid,
mm.
Pocahontas, the different Disney princesses. They set that template, and so a lot of girls now, parents said, this is much better. What was going on at the same time? Nirvana,
Mm,
Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Sonic Youth, no,
mm.
we don't want you listening to that stuff. So Disney was seen as the safe
Mm.
uh, cultural thing. That and Pixar, Toy Story, and things like that, which eventually Disney bought as well. So
But
yeah,
yeah, but also I think the thing with Harry Potter that charms with me is that sort of there's the esoteric in there, there's symbols in there, there's this idea that you're watching somebody almost like growing up and they change, but the change is much more organic because it's actually watching kids get older and their haircuts change and they become,
mhm.
aware of, relationships, and you watch that whole Harry Potter thing which moves, from sort of the birth to this death and rebirth, and there's definitely a Christian fundamentally with all the other stuff that's in there, all the magic, all the sort
Oh,
of
yeah, yeah.
alchemy, and all that stuff that's in there. The story is like most great stories is the New Testament basically
Yeah,
with all
and
those
and
characters in.
J.K. Rowling's put that in there.
Yeah,
It's
knows what she's doing, put it all
yeah,
in there.
and
Now, how do you
which
feel
is
that relates to Taylor Swift, though? Do you think?
well, as I pointed out in kind of the second half of her career, she makes these allusions to magic
Mm,
now and then. But as I
mm,
pointed out in the video, it's much more Harry Potter than it is,
mm,
the Gardnerian Wiccans or
mm,
something like this.
yeah.
She's not. This is one of the things that some very kind of simple-minded Christians will often say is that if you're using this imagery, you must be from the devil or something. Whereas I
Mm,
would say there's a lot of metal bands that use imagery about Satan, but I often point out that there's a difference between the kinds of bands that talk about fighting the devil versus the kind of bands that more like the black metal and such in Scandinavia, who are kind of becoming the devil. And so Taylor gives none of those vibes of the black
mm.
metal or any kind of I mean, I've never heard anything. She doesn't seem to even know about this stuff. Bless her heart, as they would say in the South. It's like she doesn't even know that, like I say, when she uses the word karma, she's not alluding to Eastern religion and the wheel of
Mm. That
reincarnation.
that's what I felt. I think it's almost like she's got a whiff of it, and she's created it herself. Whereas with Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling had studied this stuff to the. I mean, I've
Right.
gone, I've spotted stuff in Harry Potter that had been going, reams and reams and think, oh my God, she
Yeah.
got that from this,
Well,
she got that from that, you know.
that's why at the end of the document, both of the documentaries, I say if I had a chance to talk to her, I would tell her to deepen out her influences. Go back and listen to the earlier country stuff. Go into the 30s and 20s. Go listen to that. Yeah, go listen to minstrel music. Go listen to Robert Johnson and Charlie Patton. Go listen to Louis Armstrong. Go listen to this and deepen you have these roots which are connected. It's almost like there's a flower pot and the roots are still connecting into the ground, but there's just through a hole somewhere because of the pop structure. But make those connections, get further into it, because I think she needs that for her music to go on.
Well, I want to wrap up soon, but I'm going to move to one of the things I thought now, because I've been studying the history of popular music, and we've spoken about it so much, on the previous video we did. One of the things that I've become aware of is that 20th century music, the music industry, you could call the recorded music industry. It's the invention of recording that creates everything about the industry. It changes everything it touches. It's pointless studying any form of entertainment pre-recording, because once recording comes along, it completely changes it. And a lot of those early jazz records, going back to the original Dixieland Jazz Band, they're utilizing the recordings in a way Caruso didn't do, because they're using sound effects and telling stories, and then they've got narration. They suddenly go, oh my God, we could do that. And this is really, really important. And the other thing I've realized is that we're talking about a very short period of time. It's a blip in terms of human history. That in the 1920s, recorded music is created, and 80 years later, it's on the way out, because now buying physical media has gone.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to negotiate a way of understanding what entertainment will be in the future, because the cinema's going to go, mainstream media's going, everything that thing that we take for granted, which 100 years ago did not exist. Art wasn't in that receptacle. It was somewhere else. People would sit at home and get a book of poetry out, and that would be their entertainment for the night.
Right.
And now you and me have both studied this so much and got all into this. It's definitely going, but the fact that Taylor Swift is so successful, I think, is because she operates in a completely different realm in terms of the way she runs her business, the way she sees how she acts within that, and it's not big business. It feels like a little cottage industry, doesn't it? But it's huge.
One thing that I mentioned,
she's got a little. I feel like she's got a scrapbook. She goes, right, what shall I do next? And then she looks. It's all very, and the thing that I found, just to get to the end of this, the thing that I found really interesting is the fundamental spiritual or religious issue, which is the fact that we are the whole universe and a speck in the universe at the same time. And how do you negotiate that? And I wonder whether for young, especially girls, her will to power, almost this idea that you could control the world around you by being a Taylor Swift fan.
Well, and also by going to the concerts, it's the only physical connection with other people that many of these people isolated in their little virtual environments have.
This is the point I'm making. You become a Taylor Swift fan, and then you start to get brought in, and what brings you in is the story and looking for the imageries and all these sort of things, and you watch online, and you see her going, and she's on a TV chat show, and then some woman wants a ticket, and they pull her out the audience, and she gives it, and all that happens, right? And then you go and get your tickets to go and see her, and that is the join up of all these things. That's the sublime, when all these things to come together for that moment, that the universe is aligned in a way.
For me, understanding her you have to go back to when she was young. And when she first started with her first record, and even before then, she had a MySpace page. And I meant to get a photo of it because while MySpace no longer exists, on the Internet Archive, there is a few of the Taylor Swift pages. And there's a very definite little thing that she wrote kind of in the middle, just, a picture of her, and she's talking to her fans. There's only a few of them at this point. And she's saying, if you want to be my friend, all you have to do is like me. And she doesn't mean Facebook like. She means just like me. And this is, everything else is the same thing. She is still the girl who wants to be liked. She's still asking her fans to, just be my friend and such. The problem, of course, is, she was this lonely 13-year-old girl in school, and everyone thought she was weird, and maybe there were reasons why that was true. Like, who can say? But she has essentially turned herself back into that. That is to say, the person, she can't go out in public and just talk to people. You just can't call her up and say, why don't we go hang out at the restaurant? Come out with me, and which is, of course, I often think Jimi Hendrix would still be alive if anyone felt brave enough to confront him about what he was doing to himself. We put these people up as gods in the pantheon, and Jimi Hendrix was definitely a god in the pantheon to all us mortals below. He was to me as a young child, and then they can't be reached by human contact. And that's where things, and I am hoping for her sake, she does get married, that this guy she finally graduates high school in a sense, makes a few more albums. Like I say, I want her to deeper into her roots and deeper into these things. And I have the feeling she's going to pivot into another direction, maybe making movies, maybe politics. Who knows?
Well, what's interesting at the moment is that most teeny bop stars, obviously the kids grow up, so they have a certain shelf life, and then the kids grow up and they move on and they're not interested. And then when they get to 40, they get their career back on because nostalgia gets the moms now to go out and see David Cassidy or Take That or whatever it is.
Right.
But she, right now, is suddenly pulling a wider audience in.
Yeah.
And including you and me.
She's got her fans from the last, since 2000, I think, was it 6 or 7, when she really broke out as a country pop singer. So she's got fans all along the way. So some of these are girls who grew up around her age, but then she's picked up fans at each stage along the way, all sorts of different kinds of people. And she's picking up many more right now as people are going.
But when she was played in the UK, so many people were coming on the radio, and it would be a mom and the daughter, or a dad and the daughter,
exactly.
And it was bringing the families together. They were both going to see this. It's anti rock and roll. It's another thing which is hugely successful.
Right.
And I think we've touched on it. Your documentaries do a much better job of doing that, and I'm hoping that anybody watching this will go and check them. There's 2 out, isn't there?
Well,
They're both
they're
yin and yang.
I'm imagining you'll put the links below.
Yeah, the links are down below. But you want to just say, because you've got 2 separate YouTubes as well, haven't you?
Yeah, well, one's on the Anadrome, which is a newer channel which I've made specifically for music, movies, media, and such. And the other one is on the Anadromist, which is more of my channel for thinking and ideas and such. And I originally had more media content there, and it's all still there, but I'm moving some over, but I'm keeping them both places. But now, whenever I start getting an idea about music or film or something, I put it over on the Anadrome. And Anadromist means it's a fish, like a salmon, swimming back upriver, basically going home to die and spawning along the way, and regenerating and creating a whole new life form. So the Anadrome is the place where you turn and go back. So the Anadromist, that's me. Anadromous it's scientific talk, but anyway, it was an interesting concept that I learned in Alaska dealing with salmon all the time. So,
but it comes back to this thing that I think is going to be very, very important. in the next cultural epoch, which is the us connecting again
Exactly.
with the sublime and being able to see that there is a thing called truth,
Hmm.
science, rationalism, and there's a thing
Hmm.
called beauty, which is contained in the arts and music, and
Exactly.
that's a real thing. And I think the reason why Taylor Swift is doing so well, really fundamentally, because we've all talked around it and got all intellectual and had a good thing chatting about it, but I think she's real. I really believe, even though I'm 56 years old, I connected with her because I thought she's real. She
Hmm.
can get up and perform. She can
Hmm.
write her songs. She can play the guitar. She can sing. She knows how to do all that stuff. She's in control of everything she's doing. It's her vision. And if she says you only have to, all you have to do is like her, and she'll be your friend, you genuinely feel that that's the case.
Right. Yeah.
Genuinely feel that she's a
Yeah.
genuine person, straight down the line, and she's
Right.
not going to mess you around.
And if
And
you could talk to her without the show, you would find, I think, she's just a normal person, as much as she can
mm,
be, having that much power. You know,
but a normal person. But I think a there is some sort of genius there or extreme
mhm,
talent, but it's different to what I know, or maybe
right.
you've got a lot more interest in more wider culture. But for what I know and how I judge music, there's nothing for me there. It's like I don't
Right.
get this.
No,
But
what we're
I
seeing is a sincerity coming back.
yeah, that's what I think that's what moved me. I thought,
Mhm.
it's like she knows the score. So,
Yeah.
somebody writes to her and they go, we can't come and see you because we live too far away, and it's such a shame, but we'd love to come and see you. So she decides to go over there
Mhm.
and go to that place and knock on the door. And she comes in, everyone screams and they start crying, and it's like a religious experience for her to be there. But she's so just fits in like a normal person. But then she can get up and perform, and she can do all the things right. And I really don't feel that there's a big marketing campaign saying, right, where are we going to go next? Because this is what makes us successful. It does make us successful, but I think in this case, it's come from a real place. I felt that. So I have a little
Mhm.
tear come in my eye of going, oh my God, it's
Yeah.
something real.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Exactly.
something real.
Well, that's why it's like she's hovering, she's watching people, and then she says, "I think I'll go over here." And then she shows up at someone's house, and there's, lots of those stories. She doesn't do it so much anymore because it's very hard when she leaves the house now. She just everywhere she goes, if someone hears she's there, you know, flocks of Swifties will emerge.
I'll tell you one guy that used to do this was Frank Zappa. He used to do it all the time, and there's a brilliant story where these two guys had gone to see the gig and they were chatting and they said our brother couldn't come because he's in bed and I don't think he could afford a ticket, but he couldn't come. And they said, well, where are you? And they said, he's about 20 minutes away. And then they turned around to Frank and said, why don't you come over to the house? We'll sneak you into his bedroom. You sit there, and then we'll wake him up. And you'll turn around, and Frank Zappa will just be sat next to his bed. And Frank goes, "That sounds like a great idea," and he did it.
Yeah, that's
you
great.
know,
That's great.
and I can remember there was certain when I was back when I played with Robert Plant, there was certain that dichotomy of being with a real person who is absolutely worshipped and being able to
Mhm.
walk down the road and people are passing out
Yeah, yeah.
as you walk down the road with him, and yet getting into all sorts of normal situations where
Mhm. Mhm.
people didn't recognise them and all that type of stuff,
Right.
and seeing how Robert negotiated it, but Robert's a rock star. It's a different thing,
Yeah. And as I
absolutely
pointed
different
out,
thing.
her whole thing is feeding off the love of people, whereas the rock star is more like they're
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 aloof, yeah.
they can be brutal. They can stand above the crowd like they're, uh, Thor or Zeus. They're like
I
sending
I
thunderbolts down.
we'd done this gig somewhere. We were eating before the gig, and we were in this restaurant, which meant they'd shut the whole restaurant of there was only us in, so we didn't have to be bothered by anybody. It's a great big restaurant. It's all dark. There's only lights on our table. Huge restaurant, all empty. Someone comes in and they say, "There's a guy outside. He's the biggest Led Zeppelin fan in the world. Could he come in and say hello?" And so Robert goes, yeah, sure, bring him in. You know, so he's a professor at the university. He's a really clever guy. So, oh, bring him in then, bring him in. So we're all eating, and then suddenly the doors open, and this figure walks all the way across the room, and we all shut up. And the tension as he walks up like this, and then he finally arrives at the table, and he goes, "Oh, you know, Mr. Plant, I love your music. I love you so much. I really do love you." And he starts gushing. And Rob's goes, slow down, don't worry, slow down. He's trying to say his little speech. And he realizes, because he's a clever guy, that he is gushing. And he tries to move over to not being gushing. And then insults Robert by going, well, I don't like everything you do. In fact, there's one album I hate of yours. It was like that. And I think that album was terrible. In fact, I don't know why you did it. And then he realized what he'd done.
Oops.
And he burst out crying. This guy burst out crying.
Mm.
And we all looked at him. There's about 20 of us at this table. We all looked at him and he's crying his eyes out, and nobody knew what to do. So we gave him a round of applause. So we clapped him and he went, you know, like this, all really upset, and he skulked off. You know, waited probably 50 years to have this moment that was then completely destroyed, and he'll go over it for the rest of his life. And when we went, we were like, bloody hell, what was wrong with that bloke? And Robert turned around to me and he said, you never say that, ever. He says, you are here because of them.
Right.
He says, that's why you're here, and you will give them the utmost respect. So, and I thought, that's a great artist. That's someone who understands, and they do know that. They do feel it. But the thing is, in this postmodern world that they reside in, you still had to come out and be aloof and look like a golden god or whatever it is.
Right.
I think Taylor Swift, there's something else. There's a vulnerability and a normality. There's a girl next door nest, apple pie, and you know, and all that type of thing going on. And I think it's the relationship to these big themes that are coming back in.
Right.
To you know, I think a lot of the things that seem to be that have an effect in culture seem to be going back to, it's like a fundamental idea. I mean, it's like you look at the film industry. The film industry has stopped telling stories. It's no longer got archetypes. There's no heroes. There's no villains. You know, there's no virgins. There's no dark shadows. And so you go watch these films and they don't resonate with you because you go, well, I don't know. I'm not really interested in any of these people.
Right.
And I think that's Taylor Swift has something. I'm really trying to put my finger on it. I think the jury's out. I've tried my best. Bird. I've tried my best. But anyway, go and check out his videos. Go and see what inspired me. So you changed my mind on Taylor. You know, you've changed my mind on Taylor. I was
just being neutral. So, you know, in the sense that I respect her, I've got my issues, but hey, I find her fascinating. I'd love to sit down and talk with her. You know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what are you up to next? What's your area of study at the moment? What's fascinating you?
Oh, let's see. I've got a few more conversations coming up. I just made a video about a thing called the symptom pool, and the symptom pool is an idea coming from psychology that many of the mental illnesses that we have. And there's a book called anyway, I'm putting out this video probably in a week or so. I'm just finishing it up now. It's already uploaded, but it's basically saying that it's not just pop culture we're exporting. The Americans are exporting around the world. We're also exporting our definitions of mental illnesses, and we often do this through awareness campaigns. So, for instance, there's a big story in the book, this book, where it's this in Hong Kong there wasn't anorexia as we know it, but there was a different kind of an anorexia, not one where a girl is looking at herself and saying, "No, I'm just too fat. I'm too fat," but rather someone saying, "I'm too full, so I can't eat anymore." It was just very different, weirdly cultural centric, rather than the standard model for anorexia. A woman died of it on the streets in about 1997 or so, and then the American doctors and NGOs and stuff got hold of this, came over to Hong Kong and did a campaign of awareness for this. And what they discovered was it was the campaign of awareness more than, say, the media images that spread it. And so it was a very interesting concept. So I've been thinking a lot about social contagion and where do ideas come from and how do they spread and how do they morph? Uh, so that's one set of ideas I've been working on. I've already made one video on that, but um, I've
But
got a
I think
series.
our era of the sort of rock and roll era was basically like a social contagion. That's what the record
A
industry did.
different
That's
kind from where
yeah,
we are now.
yeah,
You know, it was
and
the idea
yeah.
of rebellion and sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Mm.
But I'm doing a thing. I did 2 videos in this about a year ago, but I want to finish it up with another 5 videos called "The Cute and the Creepy." And one of my contentions is what we call cute right now, whether it's anime or the emojis people use as their avatars or whatever. This is some weird thing. This is not. People often say, "Well, you know, animals have always been cute." Well, yeah, but people have not identified themselves as cute until very recently in history.
Mm.
And so I have one video already on the subject of cute, but also creepy is weird as a subject too, because, for instance, older people are considered creepy now. Old toys, old dolls, puppets, I work with this, are considered creepy. And I've looked into why is that? Because the literal definition of creepy is things that creep around on the ground, things that make your flesh crawl, like a
Mm.
centipede or a
Yeah,
snake.
spot. Yeah.
Whereas now it's like it's a term of disapproval. For instance, one of the reasons I think old dolls and puppets and things like that are considered creepy is because they don't conform to the nature of imagery that we've been consuming as children and young adults for the last 30 years. In other words, they're not digital creations. And so those things have a certain kind of a plastic perfection to them, whereas something made out of cloth or paper mache
Mm.
or
It
wood.
could be, but you've made me think of something that I've thought, which has got. I would never mention this on my channel because it's got nothing to do with music. But clowns, clowns started off being funny. Like you look at the clown and people go, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, they look so funny," and they've slowly morphed over to a time when I was a kid, they just weren't funny.
Yeah.
But now they're terrifying.
I've got
They're
2
the,
books on my shelf behind me. And one but I've got several books on clowns because this is a subject I've been thinking about. In fact, I have a
mm,
whole video. I put it on the Anadromous channel, but I'm going to put it on the Anadrome again. It's looking at the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix. But what I do is I go through the history of clowns in it, and it's called Joker, King of the Dark Clowns. And what I point out is this idea of clowns being scary is a very recent idea.
mm,
You know, we have a few sources, including Stephen King, to thank for this. And what it is now people look back and say, oh, yeah, those clowns are creepy. Well, yeah, but you're a 21st century person saying that. But I have 2 books. One is like an encyclopedia of famous clowns, and the other one is just a picture book of clowns. One is the picture book is from 1970. It's written by a British guy. The other one is an American book from 1980. Not one mention in either of those books about clowns being scary. There's
mm.
no encyclopedia entry about the fear of clowns or anything like that. Pediophobia,
Mm,
colorophobia,
yeah.
pediocolorophobia. Anyway, uh, there's nothing in there. So this is something that's really recent. This also figures into my creepy stuff. Why did we start looking at this? You know, it's like when people will pass around images of old Halloween costumes from 100 years ago, and they go like, "Ooh, that's so creepy." And I go like, no, those are handmade, is what they really
Mm.
are. And they're supposed to be scary, but you're experiencing something very different from it
For to
because
the
you're
yeah.
used to buying Marvel characters for your Halloween costumes, Star Wars characters.
Mm.
You're used to things made for you. You know, so even if you buy a mask of, you know, Freddy or Jason or something, it fits into a neat box. Okay, it's Jason. We know Jason, you
I
know.
I think my guess would be, off the top of my head right now, is that with generations coming up and then going and then dying, and new generations coming in, and creative people coming up, there's a desire when you are young and you suddenly start creating stuff that you look at what's gone before and you want to move it forward or work against it. And so if you were to take the design of absolutely anything, a car or whatever, a clown, if you say let's put makeup on that makes you look funny, and you try and do that, and then there's another realm of clowns, and then there's another realm of clowns, and it pushes those old idea of clowns back. You could still be a clown now, you could still do it, but you'd have to change what it means, and in pushing everything back, when you look at it, suddenly our culture is going, well, that's what is funny. That's not no longer funny. That why would you do that? That's weird. And then you lose. And
humor is
it's
very interesting that way. The way it keeps morphing.
yeah.
So that what people
And I think it's because of it's to do with novelty. And I think a lot of things that are compelling, again, I go back to this, is because there's a dichotomy there and you're pulling them together. I think that's what humor is that most jokes are like, is that you could see two ways of seeing the thing. And because your brain can't deal with putting them all together, you laugh.
Right.
And I think you laugh because it's an adapted snarl, isn't it? We basically go, I'm not too sure about that. So I'm going to put it at hand's length, And so, 200 years ago, when they thought, let's have some clowns at the circus and let's dress them up, and do all that, and they thought, well, this will be really funny. And people saw that as funny because you're harnessing that snarl, that otherness, where you go, I'm nothing to do with that, which is basically what it is. There's two things. I think all humor is based upon that to some extent.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think these cultural. I believe there's cultural epochs, and I think things steady, and they go for a certain time, and they sort of work within themselves, and then the whole thing collapses, and you come out, and we are actually in the new one now.
Exactly. We are no longer in the rock era, for one thing.
No.
We are no longer in that late 20th century. There was a whole thing that happened in the 20th century. I have a book that I want to I wrote the first chapter of it. But I want to finish the whole book, and it's basically how the 20th century is like a war in sound, and there's different battles, skirmishes, and the different sides are the old culture, and they end up losing, you losing the traditions and stuff, but then you have the commercial culture, and then you have the artistic culture, but then rock and early jazz, rock and roll and early jazz kind of operate in this zone it's not really pop music in the traditional sense, but it's also not really it's not quite folk music anymore either. And so that's a very interesting thing. Sometime we'll talk
But that's the biggest thing we could do. We'll be here for 3 hours if you get to that. Okay. Thanks, Bird, for being on the show. It's been absolutely brilliant. I will now press stop. Everybody, what did I need to say at the end of the video? Go and check out these links to these videos. I found them really compelling. I don't put something on my channel unless I'm compelled to do so. Loads of people say,
I'm glad I inspired that. A few people seem to be getting something from it, so I'm glad.
Yeah,
I would be very interesting if this would slip out of our kind of narrow tracks into
that's what I'm hoping,
the Swiftie world. And
that'd be brilliant.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
You
never know. You never know. And also, if you like this video, put a like on it. I don't normally say this at the end of the interview videos. Interview videos never do as well as me just talking to camera videos. So please like it, which will make more people see it. Subscribe to the channel. Go and support me on Patreon or put some money in the PayPal tip jar. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you soon.